I spent 10 years outsmarting the office, right, and office politics, working in top firms, if you're new to the channel, like Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, and so on. And I want to give you some key tips on outsmarting office politics. And this is how you can avoid being a victim of a lot of the corporate traps that they set up for you, and how to win bigly, to quote Donald Trump. So I want to help you stop being a corporate pushover and learn how to not get played, essentially, and stop being abused by these type of workplace office rules. So the first thing is going from being optimistic to open eyes. And what I mean by that is, when you study and you're in your education, maybe at college or university, a lot of that is deliberately training you to be conformist, right? Not preparing you for individual success. A lot of times you're content at graduation and you think you've got a big future ahead of you, which you could have in an office job, things like that. The school was kind of training you for this almost communist-like conformity, not individual excellence. And as we can see from this headline, more education doesn't always get you more money. As this report finds in this particular headline, some people are studying, masters, PhDs, and they have the same career opportunities, or even worse, compared to other people who've just got a bachelor's degree or just a college degree, in the sense that when you do additional studying, you might delay your ability to develop experience to work at top companies, and that in effect doesn't benefit your job prospects. Next up is around corporate jobs, right? Corporate jobs have all these illusions to keep you enamored and avoiding the fact that your salary might not be increasing dramatically. You've just got a job title, a drive promotion, where you've got extra work and a fancier title without more money. And a lot of these things mask exploitation, and could be a lack of reward for extra effort, right? In corporate America, lots of times people are stuck to the job title, a fancy office, a big skyscraper that they don't own, a fancy desk, and some kind of fancy suits they might have and a sense of superiority over others in other type of jobs. But in reality, it's all there to keep you under illusion, right? And sooner or later, you need to start considering how much money you're actually really making after bills, after the high living cost of living in a major city, and how early you can really retire, and how much power and leverage you really have when you could be subject to a layoff at any moment. Can you afford a family? In some cases, people can't afford relationships and developing their life in that sense, right? You need to essentially know your worth, understand your market value to negotiate a higher salary, right? And if you look at some of my recent videos, I've covered salary negotiations, which will really help you out. And another thing I wanted to mention here is around promotions that are becoming rarer, right? Because many entry-level workers can't even start, because many people, due to the job cuts, due to layoffs, lack of pay rises, all the leverage currently due to this potential kind of recessions environment we're in, inflationary environment, lots of companies have the leverage now, not so much the workers, which we saw several years ago. Now the promotions are becoming rarer, people are kind of being staying in the job where they're at, or you might have an entry-level worker competing for a new job with someone who's been working for 5 years and has been out of work for 6 months to a year because they're part of a layoff, and a company will give the more experienced worker more of an opportunity and give them the job over someone who's entry level. So it's kind of difficult in terms of dynamics, but you need to understand how to outsmart office politics by essentially navigating through these difficult scenarios, even if that means kind of staying put before you move to another job, or accepting that you might have to accept a not so good deal just for now until you could leverage, and your leverage increases perhaps due to the economic conditions around you in the country increasing and improving. So the next thing is around recognizing systematic bias, because being unfairly targeted is just something that can occur, right? If the system, which is populated by NPCs and normies and run by psychopaths, essentially it is targeting individuals who typically could think for themselves. Sometimes it's people on the spectrum, people who can think different, people who have good critical thinking skills, free thinkers, as Kanye West would frame it, or independent thinkers, who could target, and it targets people who are strong individuals who are different, who can learn and assess their true market value and see through a lot of the corporate BS to negotiate better opportunities. The thing is, I've pointed out this headline here, the silent danger of conformity, why your success doesn't look like everyone else. And what I'm trying to point out with that kind of headline I extracted is that, when you want to be successful, sometimes you've got to take slightly different paths from everyone else, right? Because a lot of times you could be unfairly targeted for thinking different, for not being an NPC or a normie, because system sees you as a threat because you can think for yourself, and you could be outcasted for even a slightly different opinion, dress style, or communication style. So when you think for yourself, you display confidence and have healthy boundaries, sometimes your suggestions for improving processes at a company could be ignored. You could be overlooked by other employees who are favored due to nepotism and beneficiary or conformist perspectives. And then when you're somewhat different, for some reason society loves to nitpick, and corporations love to nitpick against you and criticize every small thing you do. They put in writing the smallest bit of negative feedback to impact your career growth because you're not fitting in with the team enough. So the thing is, when you want to do more work, you want to be rewarded with higher salary, and sometimes you've got to understand that success at a particular company doesn't depend on doing more work. It depends on being more of a conformist and playing more of that character. So next up, I want to talk about corporate deceptions. It's important that you can see through corporate deceptions, unclear expectations at work. Sometimes they deliberately give you unclear expectations at work to blame you when something goes wrong, when they didn't give you clear instructions in the first place. And the other thing is around quiet job cuts, around people leaving or them not giving you promotions or pay rises until you leave the company. And then other ways they could undermine you through deliberately overworking you, dumping more work on you while other team members have it slightly easier. You have to also be emotionally detached. You have to be good at self-analysis and analyzing your state and your role in the company. And if they're devaluing you, you need to be ready to move or make a pivot for a slightly different role at the company. Now, before we move on to silence and how silence is golden, I want to dig a bit deeper into corporate deceptions. A lot of these corporate deceptions is something you might pick on a few signs on, but then it spreads gradually, right? It starts quite subtly in a way that's not immediately obvious. Then you start being undermined. People start making cheap shots at you. You become the punching bag of the office. People can make more ways of exploiting you, dumping work on you. And this is why it's important to have those boundaries and not let people take advantage of you. It can appear kind of harmless at first, and all of a sudden, you have more negative consequences. For example, there's lots of insidious practices in this sense where they can erode your trust as an employee, your trust in others, right? You start to become paranoid, second guessing things, and your productivity and well-being can suffer, right? So I want to give you some 3 examples. One around unclear expectations. So sometimes you could have a manager who gives you vague job responsibilities and then punishes you for failing to meet some kind of unwritten expectation. It creates confusion, stress, and undermines your confidence over time if it keeps happening. I've definitely dealt with that. Quite cutting in a bit more detail would be around you see less visible work that you're assigned, which means you're doing a lot of work that would be considered low value, kind of worthless, pointless work, repetitive tasks, is because the company devalues you, but they just don't want to fire you right now. So they'll give you kind of pointless work, a less impactful role under the guise of realigning the company, realigning or restructuring the team, effectively deliberately stalling your career growth in a way that's obvious to you, obvious to the manager, but on paperwork and to HR and to any company or any employee litigation scenario would appear like you're just doing your standard job and they're not deliberately sabotaging your career growth and slowing it down. So it can erode your opportunities for advancement and professional fulfillment. And the last thing is overworking, right? So they might have a corporate culture that thinks overworking and working long hours and going the extra mile, and everyone feels a work pressure to do the same and do extra work. It might lead to burnout. It leads to reduced work-life balance and creates a toxic environment, right, where you can't really work effectively. So let's talk about some of the skills you need to succeed, right? Like I say, being emotionally detached, and also understanding certain things are out of your control. Favoritism is out of your control, nepotism out of your control. And as long as you can analyze yourself, understand your mindset, strength and goals long term, you can navigate that. And that's why, like I always say, having a really healthy boundary between you and the corporate environment. So now I want to talk about how silence is golden and how the similar way you would remain silent when you're being arrested by a police officer. I've got a funny example here of Rick Ross, a former correctional officer turned gangster rapper. So when you're dealing with the police officer arresting you, you have something called Miranda rights, where they say you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can be used against you, and you have the right to advocate for an advocate, but there's some limits on what you can do. So this is what I mean. This is the type of dynamic that you're stuck in. And being silent in the workplace environment is sometimes the best thing, right? The same way when you're being arrested, anything you can say will be used against you. Your rights are suspended in a sense. And then it's the same way when you're working for a company which operates like an authoritarian dictatorship. They have a lot of power and leverage of you. You should think about how you speak to co-workers, managers, any kind of little critique of the company or the work or something, even the way the team's structured. Someone will take that gossip about it and be passive aggressive about it. And there's kind of three key examples here. Now, you have a right to remain silent. And what I mean by that, you're not obligated to share personal details about your professional life, right? You don't have to overshare with sensitive information that can be used against you in office politics, especially about your weaknesses, frustrations, or plans to leave the company. And then also you have the idea of anything you say can be used against you, which applies to the police and in a corporate environment. You should be aware of any words you use in meetings, emails, and casual conversations. Even seamless, harmless comments can be taken out of context or twisted to harm your reputation or career progression. So always think carefully before you speak, because people can always manipulate it and adjust the tone that you used and said the tone was inappropriate. So just be careful about all these little things. And the last point is about your right to an advocate. And in the legal context with a police officer, it means you have a right to an advocate in the sense of an attorney, of legal representation. But in the terms of in a corporate environment, you have the right to build a network of mentors, trusted colleagues, and allies who could act as your advocate in challenging situations. Having someone support or vouch for you in office politics is kind of very important. The same way when you have legal representation in disputes. So if someone's attacking your reputation in any sense, at least you have some people that, I'm not saying they're going to stick out their career and risk that to defend you, but at least they'll do something to help benefit you, or they might have something positive to say if the manager is reviewing your general feedback from co-workers. And that's very important. It's very important to understand that and try to collaborate where needed and build some strategic alliances that are going to really help benefit you. Maybe you collaborated with someone on a project, working with some key powerful people, and this will build goodwill and ensure that people can rely on you, and you build a reliable reputation in case it's ever attacked in the future by a toxic co-worker. Next thing here is around knowing your worth, right? First thing you need to do is to be able to know your value, monetize your skills, as we see here, right? So when it comes to knowing your worth and monetizing your skills, you need to avoid environments that deliberately undermine you or devalue you. I've worked with co-workers, for example, who have been quite negative in general, and they will essentially take little pot shots at me, and I should have realized at an earlier stage that I should have moved to another company after getting a couple years experience. Because if someone gets away with making disparaging comments against you and the managers let it slide, then it's kind of like you're just devalued there, you're very little value there, and they're trying to let you know indirectly you might as well leave because we can get away with making inappropriate jokes around you or insulting you and you can't do anything. Now, when it comes to monetizing your skills, it's important to avoid environments that deliberately undermine you and devalue you, right? When it comes to this little meme we have here, it talks about how decent worker is drowning while management is focusing on employees that suck up to them. And that's very much a reality that we all have to deal with. So if you know your worth, you have and develop special skills and abilities, you need to tap into those to monetize them, right? Whether it's, moving company, making sure you don't downplay your worth because people are focused on you having the right belief systems, being engaged in woke culture, this kind of crabs in the bucket, tall poppy syndrome. I've dealt with one specific case of a manager that really was focused on holding everyone down just to make himself look better. And he was super insecure, probably the most insecure person I've known in my life. So I should have kind of left that role a bit earlier. And I recommend you, if you're dealing with someone who's deliberately trying to hold you down, you might stay there for a year or two to get your experience there, but then keep it moving. That's why it's important to kind of focus on the money aspect of things and the leverage that will give you over the long term. I think there's a lot of instances where other power players in that structure, you may be older management contacts, they kind of understand your value, but they don't want you to know your value, because you know your value, you're in a stronger negotiating position, right? So that's why you could be deliberately overlooked, and they can really overlook the value you're adding to something. And I remember an instance where I was working for a company, and what I ended up doing was essentially working quite hard there, but I was underpaid for the role at the time. And then all of a sudden I started putting in less effort and stopped picking up for other people's mistakes. My manager at the time kept changing. They were always making mistakes, quite inexperienced for the role. I was always picking up their slack, and I stopped doing it. I would just do the work that was assigned to me and didn't pick up the slack of other people. And then all of a sudden, you start realizing how much value you're adding to the team, because people are very disorganized, making mistakes, and you're expected to always catch them when they fall. But the management wasn't paying me to do that. They were giving me quite a low pay for that particular role, given my level of experience. So this is the thing. Don't let them devalue you and explain this is the value you're adding. And if they don't really take it seriously, just look for somewhere else to work. At the end of the day, what you're looking to do is generate real wealth for yourself, the people you care about, instead of being exploited by others. Avoid being easily undervalued and dismissed by these HR Karens, these girl bosses, the older men in management who don't understand the circumstances of most younger men. And this is what I mean. A lot of these corporate strategies, they create deliberate self-doubt to exploit your labor at lower wages. We've got this type of gaslighting here. This headline says US salaries are falling and employers say that compensation is just resetting, which means that they think that the pay has risen significantly over the last few years, and now there's a lack of increase in salaries because things are just adjusting. The salary raises have been due to inflation, but now there's lower salary increases because I guess people just don't deserve to have salary increases when inflation's at an all-time high. This is the type of gaslighting you have to deal with. Point C here was around prioritizing your personal wealth, as I say, your independence, playing with fire, which is essentially financial independence, retire early. Many people want to quit work early and retire early in their 30s. Next up, I want to talk about point 4, right? And point 4 is around these gaslighting gossipers and sensitive snowflakes. These are the type of people who you have to deal with typically, right? You deal with a lot of gaslighting in corporate jobs when it comes to people trying to manipulate your colleagues, manipulative co-workers, and they're trying to make you doubt your perceptions, memory, or competence, right? Saying that you aren't good at something when you are good, lying to you, saying they agreed something with you and maybe it wasn't exactly how they worded it. Don't let them trick you out your position. Don't let them lead to you doubting yourself, right? As you can see on the screen right now, you should avoid these traps by staying factual and calm, keeping a track record. Confronting the shadows is a headline here. He talks about how gaslighting in the workplace is quite common and it can erode your workplace morale and destroy trust. Next up, I want to talk about avoiding certain conversations, right? So this is quite interesting. We're going to get onto this in a moment, but I want to give you a few more examples around gaslighting, because gaslighting is more common than you think. 3 quick examples of gaslighting at work. A manager could tell an employee that they never requested a report, even though the employee has emailed proof that they did request a report, and the employee is questioning their memory. What did they tell me versus what was in writing? Did I misunderstand? These are the type of common things you have. Then you have, it could be a co-worker that dismisses your concerns about a toxic work environment. They're saying you're being overly sensitive, everything's fine, everyone else is getting along with it, so there's something wrong with you, even though you see some genuine issues. Third example could be a boss undermining an employee's achievements by attributing their success to luck rather than their ability, their skills, and things like that, and just saying, oh, it's a luck, there are other factors in play as to why you did well. So this is the type of ridiculous gaslighting you have to deal with. Next thing is around avoiding certain conversations, right? So certain conversations, people get very sensitive. Sometimes it's best to say less, because when people are gossiping all the time about personal lives, about controversial topics, these can always be twisted to harm your reputation. As you can see here, thank God for all the gossip and backstabbing our co-workers provide for our entertainment. Otherwise, work might actually start to feel like work, which is kind of a meme online. And this is the truth. Lots of people like the drama at work. They like all of that type of stuff. And that's why it's best when you're dealing with these gaslighting gossipers is to say less and focus on achieving more, because only speak when it benefits you. Sometimes you have to be very straightforward, avoid being involved in gossip or being the target of gossip. Of course, don't express your personal views on contentious topics like politics, religion, and so on. Talk about general things like sports and movies. Your reputation for doing work and being friendly is kind of important. So as long as you are shown as someone who can get the work done, be modestly or neutral or friendly, not being a pushover or overly helpful, this will help protect your position. When it comes to co-workers, sometimes they want to gaslight you to saying something inappropriate about race, religion, politics, conspiracy theories, things like that, to get you reprimanded or make you look dumb in front of co-workers, typically the normies and NPCs who want to hear you parrot. typical agreed opinion. They try to get you to look angry, so you snap, so you look stupid because you say something controversial on a hot topic in front of others. I've dealt with that type of gaslighting before, just because they want to ruin your reputation and build a consensus amongst employees that you're a bad worker. And these are the things. The best way of approaching this is reversing question back to them and then moving back onto your work, right? This will help you avoid emotions and these argument starters. And lots of people are unhappy, so they like to get into arguments or kind of strategically make you look dumb in front of others. I'll give you an example. I remember working on the trading floor and the topic of 9/11 came up. I don't want to really discuss that in detail, but essentially a co-worker, because I had different opinions on different topics, he tried to always portray me some kind of radical conspiracy theorist, and he brought up some of the conspiracy theories, and it's like, oh, that's what you believe, Ethan, isn't it? And I just kind of saw how we were in front of other co-workers. He was trying to make me look dumb or like a crazy conspiracy theory guy. I said, no, I've never said that before. I don't know why you'd bring up that anyway, but maybe you believe that. You've got to put it back on them. Like, what do you believe? Do you think that's the truth? Or you seem to know a lot about these conspiracy theories. Do you get what I mean? That's what you've got to do with people, because they're obviously trying to frame things to make you look dumb. And then I want to talk you through a bit more information about these type of sensitive snowflake types, right? You have to be polite and detached at work and kind of maintain a neutral work persona, maintaining professionalism and avoiding their type of emotional and manipulative tactics, as I mentioned. So some of these sensitive snowflakes who get emotional about anything, they will take jokes, sarcasm and banter, and there's usually a double standard there. So for example, a female employee can make a joke about a man's age, a man can't make a joke about a woman's age or her weight or anything else, but a woman can say a man is too short or things like that, but those jokes don't work vice versa. You know, there's always a double standard there. Same thing in real life, right? Outside of work, people are very easily offended. Even people who make jokes about themselves, you might make a similar joke about them and they get offended, so they can make a joke about themselves. You say something similar and then all of a sudden they hate you and they have a grudge to get back at you and make a cheap shot at you later. Also, you have a lot of snitch culture. And what do I mean by snitch culture? The same way criminals might snitch on each other to the police, workers might snitch on you, and if you say anything that's critical, they might exaggerate that or give an inaccurate retelling to others to make you look worse. If you maybe made a brief comment in your long work day about there's a bit too much work to do or something like that, they'll go and tell a manager he said he doesn't want to do all the work that you've assigned him. This is the type of little point scoring that they do, like a teacher's pet at school or hall monitor, things like that. They have no problem creating a negative perception of you against you. So, for example, female co-workers, I've seen this, they'll band together to maybe falsely accuse you or say you said something inappropriate or that you're toxic. You make co-workers feel uncomfortable to exploit you. These typical high school games is really how the corporate world works now. It's very feminized and very immature. Now I want to talk about this whole strategy, right? So we want to compare their strategy versus your strategy, right? When their strategy is to get you to second guess yourself, doubt reality through the gaslighting, help you lose confidence in your instincts, your ability, your competence, question reality, and then your strategy is to dodge and deflect that, right? So what I mean by that is not saying anything negative about the job, the others, or management, not discussing your personal life or feelings too much, being friendly but not friends, just being polite. Everyone is self-interested at the end of the day. They'll try to sabotage your success, and giving vague answers to a certain extent to some of the controversial questions they might ask. So if they ask you a question to see if you support criticisms of the manager, just say things like, that's interesting. I'm just focused on this task for now. I'm just focused on the work I'm doing right now. You can always fake ignorance when it's convenient. If they say, oh, coworker A sucks, you can just say, oh, I just didn't notice that. I'm just focused on the work I'm doing right now. They'll always try to drag you into their emotional drama. It's just a constant annoying thing you have to deal with. You can leave them hanging. If they're getting involved in gossip, just saying, oh, you have to go back to work. You're kind of busy right now. If they're busy whinging and complaining, just, pick up any reason why you have to leave. That's the best approach to deal with these type of toxic people. Next up, I want to talk about training, right? So training is like a theatre show. When you start a new job or you're doing a new task, they'll give you training on a new system, but a lot of the times it's completely useless training. Everyone's been through onboarding training, and it's either kind of generic workplace culture type training, or they're teaching you how to use a system, but it's never explained that well. A lot of this onboarding training lacks a lot of depth. It leaves the employee themselves to figure out the task independently. When you're watching the mandatory workplace harassment training, and some of the jokes are fire. That's a bit of a meme there, right? Because you've all been through those pointless workplace culture trainings, sensitivity trainings, diversity trainings, and it's kind of annoying, some of the ridiculous amount of trainings you have to go through and how useless they are. But if we go through in a bit of detail, so when it comes to the onboarding training you get, typically it's rushed. It's from a co-worker who might be handing over their role to you while they move to a new role. They don't really have an interest in helping you understand it too well. Lots of co-workers don't want you to do well because it might make them look bad or make them look inefficient if you can do something super easily and quickly that took them many months to learn. Or they just don't want to see other co-workers do well in general. So they might give you a rush training. You can get their contact details for asking them future questions later, making sure you get the contact details of not only that individual who's training you, but also understand the team, the support team for various systems that you're using, because typically co-workers might blank you, they might not answer your questions. So if you know, okay, the support team for this particular, let's just say, risk management system, at least you can go to that tech team to help you if the system's not working fine or you're not sure how to do something, or there's some user guides. Try to make sure you've got as many sources of information on anything, because the training is never going to be as good as it should be. Normally they're just quickly running through things. They're not really teaching you or training you, right? They're kind of quickly doing a quick run through, and then you're meant to get it and work on it every day. Often the workplace training, there's no real advice or monitoring or really coaching. You just get the blame if you can't do something because you didn't pick up on it super quickly. And the best approach is they want you to work on something in a lot of detail, but they only give you a surface level explanation, right? So they give you a 2-minute explanation, but then you're meant to be mastering it like you've been working on it for like 2 months. That's the type of level of ridiculous training and the surface level training that they typically give to you. So the key thing I would advise is that when you're given all this new information, is learning the basics and just figuring out what you need to do. So if they're giving you training on a big system, just trying to learn the basics of what you need to do. Maybe you need to use it to log 2 or 3 things. That's how you should just get started. And as much as possible, take notes, share an email summary, send follow-up questions as quick as you can. Because if you ask questions earlier on in your training, on your onboarding, then you can get away with that. But if you're asking certain maybe basic questions a few months down the line into the job, people can be very judgmental on you because it appears that you're not competent. And if you do it early on, they might say, oh, you seem quite interested and efficient. It looks good from an office politics standpoint, and you won't be judged for asking some of those questions. So as it says here, develop your resource network. Make sure you can have those user guides, the support teams, not just the one contact who trained you, so you can have many avenues for asking questions, taking notes, documenting everything to show your competence. And then again, focusing on your essential tasks, because that's what's going to help you get paid, and that's the core of your job. So if you don't know some other little minor detail, don't worry about it too much, because the training is not going to be good anyway. So just focus on the main points. And clarify the expectations to avoid blame, so it's clear what you actually need to do. And as you can see from this headline, what after-hour emails really do to your employees. Constant communication and scrutiny can actually hurt your team's performance. And I put this there because so many people, they get caught up in all these extra minor tasks, even doing things outside of work hours. Focus on what is the core of your job and not get too caught up in all the little minor points, and try to avoid doing a lot of this minor extra work that's not really going to benefit you or your career over the long term. Just keep you busy. And the next part is around asking questions to expose ambiguity. Many people are afraid to ask questions, right? Because they're worried that they're going to be judged. So I would say what you need to understand is to protect yourself, you have to ask questions, and you can ask them directly in private rather than in a broader meeting where people might judge you for maybe asking some basic questions. But the key thing about asking questions is to expose ambiguity. As we know, in the corporate environment, it's very passive aggressive. There's lots of double meanings to everything people are saying. So you need to kind of be able to delve deeper into that. And what I mean by that is if someone's giving you some instructions, if it's not clear, you can go through those ambiguous instructions by asking them to repeat the key points to make sure you're on the same page, because they can always twist something and say, I said this to you, you should have understood it, but then later down the line it has a different meaning. So that's why you really want to drill down to it. So you say, oh, please, can you clarify that? What do you mean by this? And then you let them explain it and kind of put them on the spot to explain something to you if there is any ambiguous passive-aggressive competition. And the thing is, don't leave meetings confused, because repeat what they say back to them, like, okay, so you said this, so it means that. So ensure your understanding is what they intended. For example, they might say, if you do some extra work next year, you'll get promoted. So you need to respond with, okay, what is the exact task? How do I know if I've achieved it? How do I quantify that I would have achieved it? Other phrases you can say in terms of, can we clarify that? What do you mean by that? Just so I understand correctly. When you say something like do the work to the best you can, to the best of your ability, you might need to drill a bit deeper to get specific, precise answers, to have some bit more transparency. Like, okay, cool, the best of my ability, how are we defining that? Because if I do a piece of work and it's kind of good, they can shift the goalposts, shift the end zone, right? And say, okay, at the end of the year, you've done all this extra work, and then they kind of say, oh, it's just not really that a big deal. You just did a little extra work on this project. We can't use that as justification to promote you, for example. These are the type of vague promises they might give you. As you can see here by this meme, when it comes to promotions, you want to ask for specific actionable tasks and criteria. And the way they can insult you in a passive aggressive way before we get to this meme is you might say, okay, so what exactly would I need to do to move to the next level and get promoted, after you've maybe explained to them what you've done this year through detailed explanation. And they say, oh, well, the description of what it takes to make it to the next level, let's say vice president, it's on the company site, so you can read that and take it from there. And I'll just say, oh, I've read that and I'm meeting that criteria, and I've demonstrated this in writing through this explanation or report I've written about what I've done compared to that criteria. And the truth is, the promotions don't work that way. It's not about meeting certain criteria. It's about getting the buy-in or the sponsorship from certain senior stakeholders that like you. And that's really what it's about. And having some level of technical skills and evidence of work you've done too. But they're never going to say it that way. So there's lots of gaslighting in that sense. So when it comes to vague promises, this is the type of ridiculous you get from senior management. They say, thank you for your hard work and dedication to the team. And you have all the senior management, they're sitting on all the money, they get all the money, they pretend to be kind of emotionally neutral or maybe kind of down like everyone else. Meanwhile, what do the employees get? A pizza party to celebrate maybe the fact that they're not going to get much from their company in terms of a bonus or a pay rise that day or that year, but all they're getting is a pizza party to kind of keep them preoccupied. And that really is the dynamic, even though they'll mock you to your face and expect you to be happy with them, is completely and utterly ridiculous. And that's what I mean, final point here around seeking transparency, getting precise instructions to prevent any communication or unmet expectations. Now, the last point here in this presentation is around email summaries. Now, email summaries will really save you. How can email summaries save you? Firstly, by avoiding workplace disagreements by getting things in writing, right? So that's like a headline I've got there, right? Now, in terms of you want to have meetings with others, summarize things on emails after the meeting, protect yourself from future accusations of not doing everything in time, sticking to deadlines, doing it as agreed. Get an email asking for agreement and correction. Just say you do this to be thorough. Sometimes in corporate worlds, deliberately there'll be misinterpretations. They'll say one thing and mean another and then blame you later. Often they deliberately forget what they said to rug pull you and say, we agreed this, didn't we? And then you're basically stuck in between a rock and a hard place. It's not clear what was agreed, what's in writing, what's not in writing, things like that. So that's why you should just have meetings and put everything in writing so they can't manipulate you later, right? Your email is your last line of defense, right? It's like a shield that you have from potential future accusations. The same way recorded meetings and calls, which you might be able to do depending on the local laws and what's recorded and whether your company is recording the calls or not. And this will help you avoid conflicting information and instructions. This will help you prevent you from changing deadlines, from management saying, oh, I set a deadline of today, but in fact you agreed verbally in a previous meeting that the deadline will be next week. Or they want you to do things one way and then it turns out it's another way. It's typically to demoralize you, help make you question reality. People only remember what suits their needs, right? And the thing is, you need more proof to protect yourself in this type of weird environment where they can often take advantage of essentially anything you say. They can just say, oh, we agreed something else. And that's why, unfortunately, you always got to be at work where you're guarded. You've like a UFC fight, protect yourself at all costs. You have a shield up, you're defending yourself at all times. You never know when they can flip things on you. So I hope you found that helpful. We went through a whole bunch of things: gaslighting, when silence is important, emails and tracking what's been agreed, and avoiding any type of vague communication with yourself. This is how you can outsmart office politics. I hope you found those tips helpful. I offer a career coaching service, and there is a link in description if you want to speak with me directly. Using a lot of these strategies has helped me survive and succeed through many top investment banks, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, and many others, making it from analyst, associate, director level, and kind of being prosperous in that sense. And I'm here to help you through my career coaching. Like I say, if you want to reach out to me, let me know in the description. Let me know in the comments some of your office politics tips, all the different challenges and gaslighting you might have to deal with, all these different examples I gave through here. Thanks for listening. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.